educational institutions today feel that they have the whole control of education of the child and parents have no role in it. What is the role of parents in the education of toddlers according to TLI pedagogy?
In the TLI pedagogic system, we see the parents as a very important part of the development of the child. We see that the parents are the experts on this individual being because they spend 24/7 with the child. So from the moment when the child is born, already they know the best what and how, what are the needs, what the child wants, how to approach the child. This is why there needs to be a lot of communication between the TLI guides and the parents. And we also want the parents to be involved in what's happening. So this is why we regularly meet with the parents. About 6 to 8 weeks, we have this kind of meetings where we sit together. We see if they need something, if we need something, like from the whole group of the parents. Then there are a lot of individual talks. So whenever parents feel the need of wanting to know something, they can address a TLI guide and get a meeting and a come together, an individual one. But also opposite way, if the educator, the TLI guide needs something, they approach the parents. Then it's also a very important part here that we have TLI parenting. That means that we also want to explain the LELEC philosophy, which is the basic of TLI pedagogics, to the parents. Because what we can experience over the long time now is that when parents work with the same philosophy than the TLI guide, it is the most beneficial for the child itself.
Tell us about the LELEC philosophy.
The LELEC philosophy is a philosophy which respects the child as a whole human being. It is really interesting that still today that we have human rights, we have children's rights, but still we do not respect the child as a whole being. We might think we do, but actually it's not really very common to do it. So parents and educators both normally feel very responsible for the education of the child, for gaining the knowledge so that they develop in a proper way. But when we observe a child from the first day, we can see that the child knows exactly what it needs and what it doesn't want. For example, if you have an infant, they know when they need food. You don't have to tell them, they know it exactly. And they know when it's enough, so they stop. So they know when they need sleep and they wake up when it's enough. So they have these inner impulses which really make them understand what they want and what they need. And this is what we try to really implement in the LELEC philosophy, to accept this concept that the child itself knows very well what they need and what they want. And that is a very different view on the child when it comes to education.
Something about the setup of the TLI groups, meaning the TLI daycares or preschools.
So in the TLI daycares, in the TLI groups, preschools, let's speak about the age group from 1 to 3.5. In that age group we have a setup where we have a TLI sensory room. Many systems have nowadays sensory rooms, but our sensory room is a little bit different because it really tries to activate the senses in one area on all levels. So the second we have is a TLI movement area. And then we also have a learning area, which actually is a playground. In TLI Pedagogics, we believe strongly that if we surround the children with the proper material, then it will learn by itself. We do not have to teach the child. So this is why it is very important what kind of material is there and what kind of cognitive stimulants the child becomes. In the TLI pedagogic system, we also know that especially the very little ones do not wish to express themselves so much through painting or coloring. We see educators a lot doing this kind of fingerprints with the children, which ends up that the educator paints the hand of the child, takes the hand of the child, claps it on the paper, and that's how it is done. But it's not really a natural thing that the child would do by themselves. But what they like is really using their hands on a huge piece of paper and making movements there. So This is what TLI Pedagogics tries to do in the creative area, in the cognitive area. There is a construction area, there is a movement area, there is a sensory area, there is a library, a small library with books. And all of these areas are there to support the development of the child so that by themselves they can be stimulated through these outer things and their inner impulse awakens and they start learning by themselves.
Tell us more about this movement area. How important, according to TLI Pedagogics, is movement for the toddlers for the age of 1 to 3?
The movement for toddlers is very important because the toddler's main development is still in the physical body, at least in the first and the second year of life. So when you observe a little infant, that infant is not moving, it's just laying. So the next step is that they start moving their head and they start moving their upper body, then they start crawling, then they start getting on their feet and start slowly walking. This is about the age of 1, could be also 1.5 depending how fast or how slow the child develops, could also be 8 months if they develop very fast. So in the TLI movement area we provide the equipment in such a way that natural movement can happen. For the ones who are crawling, they should have areas where they can do the crawling. For the ones who start using the stairs, they can make steps. For the ones who are just getting on their feet, there should be something where they can really push themselves up. So all of this is there in such a way that the children have movement. And then when the children are between 2.5, 3 years, it's more about already going on longer distances, starting to run the first steps. And this is what we provide in that area. So it's an area mainly built from wood, which gives different levels of movement. We do not believe so much in exercising with the little ones, like making a movement exercise or really some running, some jumping with the music. That can be done, but that's not the main point at that age level.
In your latest book, English book, Child You Are Unique, you mentioned that the use of baby walkers for this age group of 1 to 3 is not very advisable. So how does it fit into this movement area philosophy of TLI Pedagogics?
It's coming from the viewpoint of neuroscience. So when the child is developing, the brain is developing. So with each movement, the brain learns something. So for example, when the child starts to move the head, the infant actually starts to move the head, the brain is remembering this movement. And this movement is needed to come to the next movement, which is to move the upper body. And so when the infant starts to move the upper body, this is again impregnated in the brain, and it is there's a remembering of it. And this then, when it is kind of set, the knowledge in the brain of how to move the body like this, the next step can come. So learning movement for an infant to the age of 2, 2.5 is kind of a natural approach where the brain takes information from every single movement the child is doing. So when we put the children in a baby walker at the age of 6, they might walk very fast, but all of the steps in between, the pushing the body up, falling down, crawling, that is left out for the brain to remember. And we know nowadays that such steps in between, if they are not really approached, that could cause in a later time a problem in learning especially. For example, it could be that a child who never crawls has a problem to measure distances, because that is how you encounter the world. In a moment when you walk, you're just looking on that level, but when you're crawling, you're on a completely different level approaching the world. And when you're laying on your back, you're actually focusing the ceiling. So this is how you get the dimensions of a room understood very naturally. So if that is left out, the children have to learn it in a way harder way. So this is why the natural movement is the best for the child, and this is what we try to give the child in the TLI movement area.